उपविश्य मम वाचमिमां प्रसुप्तां सञ्जीवयत्यखिलशक्तिधरस्वधाम्ना अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान्नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं प्राणान्नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम्.
Suppose you don't like a person, and that dislike for the person, if you look into your own being, you will find that the dislike is causing a stress in your mind. Is it not? The person may be anything, but your dislike for the person is causing a stress in your mind. Now, the moment you start thinking in this manner, your universality and all, somehow you start loving that person. At least forcefully you hug that person and tell him that you love him and do something. The moment you are able to get over this constriction, you will find there will be so much of joy and the stress will go. Joy from where? The stress you are suffering from, the release from the stress will give you the joy, will give you the relief. So the path is so enriching, so joyous that once you start experiencing this expansion, coming out of the shell of selfishness, smallness, karpanya dosha, by itself the path will lead you further and further and further. It becomes a joyous pilgrimage. And one day you will sit and you will have the soul experience also. Because when the mind is free of all these constrictions, meditation becomes, you don't have to meditate. Meditate will dawn. Dhyana will dawn in you. You don't have to do dhyana. Because the mind has become free. Automatically it will happen. So we can progress in both directions, whatever way suits us, and attain it. Now that is why the importance in the second chapter itself, after Krishna had explained the soul, the philosophy of the Atma and the truth of the Atma, not philosophy, the truth of the Atma. Immediately Arjuna asked, by listening to this gospel in the second chapter itself, Arjuna had already come out of his grief, come out of his constriction. But don't forget the 7th verse of second chapter. That was the first thing which relieved him of his constrictions, that he became humble. He had the humility. He took refuge in Krishna as the Guru. That means he had understood to some extent his dimension. And he comes out with the question that you have told me about the soul, about the truth of the soul. But Krishna, I would like to know what happens to a human being when he realizes the soul. Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhisthasya keshava sthitadhi kim prabhasheta kim asita brajeta kim. He says a person who is in samadhi, he is called sthita prajna because there is no movement in his intelligence or mind or anything. He is absolutely silent. How do you define a sthita prajna who is in samadhi? That what is the samadhi state? I would like to know. Sthita dhihi kim prabhasheta kim asita brajeta kim. When the sthita prajna comes out of his samadhi and he is in the interactive state, he becomes sthita dhi, that his buddhi becomes stabilized in that inner anchor. He gets anchored in his inner truth. So, what is his interactional character? What are his interactional characteristics? Kim asita brajeta kim. Sthitadhi kim prabhashata. How does he speak? How does he sit? How does he move? These are figurative expressions, not that how does he move and how does he sit he is wanting to know. It only means that in that position he is, Sthitadhi is an interactive person. And will there be any change in his interactive life? From the ignorant, the interactive life of the ignorant people. Where will be the change? Because whatever the truth of the soul, it does not matter, it is abstract. We are more interested in knowing what happens to us when we actualize the truth. Do you get? There lies Arjuna's intelligence. That he immediately grasped that, oh, Atma is not a philosophy. We often go on reading the philosophy in the Upanishad, in the Vedas, in the Bhagavad Gita, and know more and more about Atma, never thinking that the Atma is what I am. And all the qualities of the Atma should shine in me. Arjuna, in the first lecture itself, he understood that actually important is how do I behave when I know the truth. And whatever are the characteristics, if he follows that, if he tries to cultivate those, he will become a knower one day. Now it started there itself. And in the 13th chapter, in describing the knowledge, he said that these qualities are the conglomeration of these qualities is what make a person knower. After that, in 14th chapter, suddenly why it is Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, 14th chapter. Gunatraya means Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. That three gunas. The whole creation is a projection of these three gunas together. And our personality is also made of these three gunas. Now it is a three guna model, you can say. Three guna model, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. A very efficient model. A very apt model, efficient model. In Bhagavad Gita, it is not so much speaking about the creation made of the three gunas. Guna means actually, you can say mode, quality, that there is no exact English. Guna also means the thread, that you make a rope with, suppose 3 strands are there, you make a rope with that. That is, the rope is made of the twisting of the 3. Like that also it can mean. But basically it is the 3 modes which get expressed as the Prakriti, as the whole nature. But Bhagavad Gita basically focuses on our personality only. It is not so much concerned about the nature. And it has utilized this 3 guna model so well that entire sadhana becomes practical for us, applicable for us. So in the 14th chapter, he starts, after presenting the knowledge in the 13th chapter, in 14th chapter onward, he starts presenting the knowledge in the manner that we will be able to practice it. There is no question of Swamiji how to do it. It's very clear from there how to do it. Suppose the whole thing becomes, we are made of 3 gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Sattva guna generally represents enlightenment, knowledge, light, etc. Rajoguna generally represents desireful activities, desire motivated activities. It means active energy, but desire motivated activity. So it means a fragmented vision of the world. Preference and prejudice dominates our personality in that case. And tamoguna means ignorance and moha, delusion. That is, if you compare the 3, tamoguna is against both sattvaguna and rajoguna. How? Rajoguna means energy, tamoguna means idleness, inertness. Rajoguna means energy, activity, and tamoguna means inactivity, inertness. Sattvaguna means enlightenment, tamoguna means ignorance. So it is opposing both the gunas. Whereas Rajoguna and Sattvaguna, if you compare, Sattvaguna always gives you a very comprehensive, these are all discussed in the 18th chapter, we will come. Each guna has been described in 14th, 16th, 17th, 18th. That is what I am saying. After 13th chapter, it's all a three guna tattva, so that the sadhana becomes realistic. Not only in 14th it has been introduced and explained. Then 16th, 17th and 18th, all are repeatedly this three guna analysis going on. Now, Sattva guna means a comprehensive vision where you can know the unity in diversity, that the oneness behind all the variegated manifestation in the world. It means enlightenment, knowledge. By nature, it means cheerfulness also. Rajoguna means a fragmented vision, desire motivated, preference, prejudice oriented, and a vision of the world. So, Rajoguna person will be very active, but he will do according to his own desires. He will be very egoistic in his actions. He will do whatever he feels to be satisfying him. Whereas Sattva guna will always have a comprehensive idea. It will not be desire motivated. It will be he will be working according to the wholesome picture of the situation. Now, if we think, don't you find that even in our working life, day-to-day life, in family, office, anywhere, is not Sattva guna the desirable quality? Suppose in a managerial meeting also, there are people who are egoistic who will say that if my word is not accepted, I cannot stay here. If you are too egoistic, or at least you will not be able to appreciate what others are saying. We are so egoistic about our opinion, our view, that we don't understand the truth in others' statements. Whereas in such a situation, a Sattvaguni will understand A, B, C, all the people what they are saying, what is the truth and what is the falsity, what are the wrong and what are the right things in them. He will be able to understand. And he will not put forward his point in an egoistic manner that either you will listen or not. He will say that, well, what you are saying might be true in this manner, but if you do that, then this will happen, that will happen. So he will try to picture the truth from a very comprehensive vision. So is it not a very desirable personality? So we need not say that, no, I don't want to become Sattvaguni because I am not interested in spirituality. That Sattvaguni will be excelling in every field of his life. Even in the family quarrels also, he will understand the point of view of the other person. He will not be egoistic and one-pointed about his own wishes and own views. Even if suppose he understands that the other person is going wrong, he will allow that, well, I feel that this will lead to this calamity or this, it is not going to be all right for us. But if you are so particular in doing it, you do. But be prepared to accept whatever comes. At that time, don't say that I have not cautioned you, or why did you allow me to do? You may do at your risk, but think that it may lead to this. I feel that it is not all right, it may lead to this. Do you get my point? So everywhere this Sattvaguni is a desirable personality. Now Bhagavad Gita clearly points out that not only for truth, to become a better human being also, your tamoguna has to be overcome by cultivating rajoguna and sattvaguna. And your rajoguni character will have to be overcome by cultivating sattvaguna. And finally, sattvaguna also creates bondage. That also he has mentioned in 14th chapter. How to overcome that bondage also has been discussed in 18th chapter. So how to become free of all the bondages. They have very clearly discussed What is the definition of Sattva Guna? How do you define Sattva Guna, Rajoguna and Tamoguna? What are their effects? How do they bind us to the various actions and the world? Even Sattva Guna binds us. And how we can overcome that bondage one after another, and finally overcome the bondage created by Sattva Guna also. Now, then they have discussed about where lies Sattva Guna, that how do you become Sattva Guna? Because our personality is an aggregate of whatever the inputs we are taking. Suppose the primary input is we are born from a certain family with a certain heritage. That creates a guna constitution in us. That is we cannot do anything about it. It is the inherent guna composition in us, inherited. We cannot do anything there. But certainly we have the freedom to change the guna composition by our effort. And that is why the Shastras are written. Suppose everything is predetermined, then the Shastras would not have been written. People say that it is all fate, it is all predetermined. Then why do we have to do anything? Then the Shastras would not have been written. Shastras have been written because there is a free will in us which can change the predetermined elements. And the Shastras show us how to change the predetermined elements. So, whatever we are born with, the inherited character, in that whatever inputs we are taking from the world, that will determine the final composition. Ahara shuddhau sattva shuddhi. Ahara means food. But food is not only with the mouth. Ahara means whatever inputs we are taking. So we are taking inputs with the mouth, with the eyes, with the ears, with the skin. All these are aharas. So whatever inputs we are taking with these different indriyas, according to that our being will be constituted. Suppose you take sattvika food, that will increase the sattva element, and we are free to change our food. Nobody can say that, how, Swamiji? It is determined, it is written which is sattvic food. It's clearly written. What is the effect produced in your body? The sattva guna, sattvika food will have these effects on your body. We have studied this. So you find out what are the food materials which is giving you rasya, snigdha, sthira, hridya. These are the qualities we are getting from there. You change your food habits according to that. Suppose you are taking the food with the eyes, whatever visions you are taking, whatever is making your mind peaceful, whatever is giving you this rasya, snigdha, sthira, hridya bhav, that you are not getting agitated, you are not becoming angry. You change your circumstances accordingly. You change your dress, you change your drawing room, you change whatever films you are seeing, whatever internet you are seeing. By what? By watching the effect on the mind. It's very simple. If you are eager, if you want to do, anybody can do. If you don't want to do, nobody can make you do. You have to see that whatever people I am mixing with, what is the effect created on my body, on my being? Whatever books I am reading, what is the effect on my mind? Whatever films we are seeing, what is the effect on my mind? So you have to change all the inputs into sattvika inputs, then you will become sattvika, more and more sattvika. Sattva guna will be predominantly there in your being. And there is a natural law of regenerative process, a natural regenerative law. What is that? The more you become sattvic, you start liking the sattvika things also. As you take sattvika input, you become sattvic, then you start liking the sattvic, loving the sattvic things. So naturally you change your habits, your food, everything into more sattvic. More sattvic you change, that again makes you still more sattvic. So that changes your preference also. You still like more do you get my point? Like that it goes on, you become more and more sattvika. Now, apart from these inputs, the most important input is input to the mind. Actually, not so much food, not so much vision also. The most important input we are giving is to the mind. That means what we are reading, what we are thinking. That what we are thinking also is an input. We have to, how your thinking will change? You change your reading habits, your interacting habits, automatically the thoughts will change. So it is a very, very practical sadhana. The question is only whether we want to do it or not. Nobody can say how. It's very clear. You have to do it in this manner. And when you become extremely sattvic also, that the sattvika bondage is there. What is that? Sukha sangena badnati jnana sangena chanagha. Sukha sangena badnati jnana sangena chanagha. That sattvika guna, sattva guna also binds us. How? One is sukha sangha and jnana sangha. Now, when it is sukha sangha, we have to know that they are talking about sattva guna. So, the sukha will be sattvika sukha. In Bhagavad Gita 18th chapter, they have defined everything in these three manners. That is, which sukha is sattvika, which sukha is rajasika, which sukha is tamasika. So even when it is sattvika sukha, that also will bind us, sangha, because we will start having it always, trying to have it always. Suppose you read the scriptures and sukha sangena, then jnana sangena, that you get attached to that jnana also. What kind of a jnana? That has to be the sattvika jnana. So in 18th chapter you go to the divisions, you will find that sattvika jnana is sarvabhuteshu yenaikam bhavam avyayamikshate abhibhaktam vibhakteshu tajnanam viddhi sattvikam. That knowledge also is divided in three categories according to the gunas. Because knowledge can be various. Sarvabhuteshu yena ekam avyayam bhavam ikshate. This sarvabhuta means all this objective appearance, the object world. It's infinite variety. Sarvabhuteshu yena ekam avyayam bhavam ikshate. One who sees the one unchanging bhava or truth in all these variegated appearances. Ekam avyayam. Avyayam means unchanging. There is a permanent element. That is what we call soul or consciousness or so. That it is all appearing. If you don't want soul also, it is all in your mind. We can go that way also, in the consciousness. Everything is appearing in the consciousness. So finally everything is made of the consciousness. The fact here I wanted to point out is that they are always reveling in finding the unity in diversity. If that much you take, it is enough. The details we will go later. He revels in finding unity in diversity. That is why we say it is a comprehensive vision. Sarva bhuteshu yenaikam bhavam avyayam ikshate. Its seeing is not with the eyes. It is ikshana. Ikshana is the vision of the buddhi, of the intelligence. His buddhi gets so enlightened that everywhere in all the varieties he finds that buddhi finds the oneness, ekam, avyayam, unchanging one. Abhibhaktam vibhakteshu. Here everything is fragmented. But he finds that all this fragmented appearance, it is only an appearance in the one. It is like writing in water or air. You write God or dog, it is both are air only, nothing else. Like that all these varieties, they are written in my mind, which is only consciousness. As in dream, when the dream produces this variety, do you doubt that it is all made of the mind? In the dream, it produces equal variety, but they are all made of the consciousness, nothing else. Like that, what we are seeing in the external world also, we will not know it unless it appears in our mind. So finally, what we are seeing, what we are interacting with, is whatever is appearing in the mind. All the variety is written in the form of with the consciousness alone, just like writing in the space. So, abhibhaktam vibhakteshu tad jnanam viddhi Satvikam. This is what is called Satvika Jnana. So what happens is that once you start reveling in this unity in diversity, reading the Shastras more and more about the soul, more and more about the Brahman, it is all speaking about this transcendental oneness. So you start revel in that, then you will be bound by that. If you are asked to go and open the gate, you will find, oh, what a botheration, I should go to the cave and study this. That is, you have got bound by the joy you are getting from that jnana, or the sukha you are getting from that. In the book you will find that Swamiji was given to meditation. Given to is too less. He says that I was a meditation monger. But I say meditation monger is not the correct, but he was indulging in meditation, that is true. He will remain in meditation. So one day it so happened that he was meditating and some villager came for some assistance, I think. And he was finding it very difficult to get up from the meditation. Finally, somehow he got up and met him and found that it was important. That day he resolved that no more meditation. I will not meditate anymore. What is the point in meditating again and again? I am not getting anything new. I have become meditation indulgent. I am indulging in meditation because of the sukha of dhyana. In samadhi you get sukha, so you meditate. So he left it at that point. This is how you can get over the sattvika bondage also. Through knowledge everything happens, or through surrender, that you leave everything. Suppose you are meditating, at that time you have to go and fight a war. Well, Lord has created the war for me, I have to go and fight, I will go and fight. Suppose in the military people, somebody takes to all these things and he is very sattvika charactered military person and he is reveling in this knowledge. At that time the call comes that you have to go to the frontier. He will have to go and fight there. So unless he gets over the bondage created by the sattva guna, he will not be able to do it. There lies the freedom of a gunatita. We then call it gunatita. That means gunatita means it's not that the three gunas are not functioning in it. There are a lot of misconceptions about all these things. Everybody, anything in creation is made of three gunas. Bhagavad Gita clearly states, there is a shloka. There cannot be any creation which is not made of all the three gunas. So sattva, rajas, tamas will be there in everything. Scientifically also I can explain it in another manner. But he will not have the bondage created by any of the gunas. He will neither be bound by the tamasika bondage, nor by the rajasika bondage, nor even by the sattvika bondage. He is called a gunatita. Now this step-by-step method is very clearly explained in 14th chapter itself, and then further elaborated in 16th, 17th and 18th chapter. So we must understand that Bhagavad Gita is not a philosophy. It is an application-oriented science. And in no other scripture we have the personality has been analyzed in so much of detail, with so many models, with so much of clarity and precision.